stolen vehicle report, license and registration.
Officer, may I ask why I was stopped?
You are making this harder than it needs to be. Out of the car, now.
Red and blue lights flared in the rearview mirror. No siren. No reason. Just the sudden, cold certainty that something was wrong. The midnight blue Lexus slowed, signaled, and pulled into the bank parking lot 2 miles west of the Houston Federal Courthouse. Behind the wheel, Judge Catherine Kettner placed both hands at 10 and 2 and waited. She had not been speeding. She had not violated a single traffic law. She was a federal judge about to become the target of the very corruption she had spent her career prosecuting. What Sheriff William Alligood did not know, 5 cameras were already recording everything he was about to do. The woman he was pulling over held a lifetime appointment to the federal bench and national security clearance that could topple criminal networks with a single signature. The black calfskin briefcase on her passenger seat contained 70 pages of classified documents that would trigger a federal response within minutes. And the fabricated traffic stop he was conducting would unravel a 15-year criminal enterprise, end with 52 years in federal prison, and result in $10 million in damages, every cent of which would fund the very organizations fighting police corruption. If you believe corruption should never go unpunished, like this video right now, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit subscribe because tomorrow's story will show you what happens when bad people target the absolute wrong person. Judge Catherine Kettner was 42 years old. She had graduated summa cum laude from Yale Law School, spent 9 years as a federal prosecutor with a 96% conviction rate on organized crime and public corruption cases, and clerked for the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Her appointment to the United States District Court for the Southern District of Texas 3 years earlier had survived Senate confirmation hearings so rigorous they had examined every case she had ever touched, every donor she had ever met, every speech she had ever given. She was not someone who made mistakes. And she was certainly not someone who broke the law. It was a Thursday in October. The afternoon sun hung low over the suburban roads west of Houston, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Judge Kettner had left the federal courthouse at 4:03, the same time she left every Thursday. Her midnight blue Lexus LS 500 moved smoothly along the familiar route, the engine a low hum beneath the classical music streaming through the speakers. In her mind, she was still reviewing the classified counterterrorism briefings she had read that morning, threat assessments, surveillance protocols, interagency coordination memos that carried the weight of national security. Then the lights appeared. Red and blue, flashing in the rearview mirror. No siren. No loudspeaker. Just lights. Kettner's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. She checked her speed. 42 in a 45 zone. She scanned her memory for the last intersection. Green light. Full stop at the sign 2 blocks before that. No lane drift. No erratic movement. Nothing. She signaled right, slowed, and pulled into the parking lot of a regional bank. The building was closed, its windows dark, but 3 security cameras perched along the roofline tracked every angle of the lot. Kettner positioned the Lexus beneath the nearest camera, shifted into park, and placed both hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Her dash cam activated automatically, a small red light blinking in the corner of the windshield. She waited. In the side mirror, she watched the patrol car door open. Sheriff William Alligood stepped out. He was a large man, mid-50s, with a crew cut going gray and a uniform that strained slightly at the shoulders. His hand rested near his weapon as he approached, his stride deliberate, his expression set. He stopped at her window. Kettner lowered it halfway. Alligood did not greet her. He did not explain. He simply stared down at her and announced that he had received a stolen vehicle report, then demanded her license and registration. Kettner kept her hands visible on the wheel. Her voice was calm, measured, and clear. She asked him, politely but firmly, why she had been stopped. Alligood's jaw tightened. His hand shifted closer to his holster. He told her he was not there to debate, and repeated his demand for her documents. Kettner did not move. Her eyes remained steady on his face. She requested the report number for the stolen vehicle claim. Aligood leaned closer to the window. His voice dropped, harder now. He warned her that she was making things harder than they needed to be. Kettner's expression did not change. She reminded him that she had a right to know why she was being detained and that she was asking a simple legal question. Aligood straightened. He did not answer. He simply repeated his demand, slower this time, each word deliberate: license and registration. Kettner nodded once. She narrated every movement aloud as she made it, announcing that she was reaching for her purse on the passenger seat and opening the center console to retrieve her registration. Her right hand moved slowly, visibly, retrieving her Texas driver's license and vehicle registration. Then she reached into the inner pocket of her suit jacket and withdrew a second item: her federal judicial credentials. The leather case bore the gold embossed seal of the United States District Court. She handed all 3 items through the window. Aligood took them. He glanced at the driver's license. Then the registration. Then he opened the credential case. His eyes moved over the embossed seal, the official photograph, the signature of the Chief Judge of the Southern District of Texas. He stared at it for 4 seconds. Then he closed the case and handed it back. He told her these could be fake. Kettner's fingers closed around the credentials. Her voice remained level. She told him they were not fake and that he could verify them through the U.S. Marshal's Service or the federal courthouse, as the number was on the card. Aligood did not respond. Instead, he stepped back from the window and ordered her to step out of the vehicle. Kettner did not argue. She opened the door slowly, keeping her hands visible, and stepped onto the pavement. She stood with her arms slightly away from her body, palms open. Aligood reached for his radio and requested backup at the First National Bank parking lot on the West Access Road, reporting a possible stolen vehicle and an uncooperative driver. The radio crackled with confirmation that backup was en route. Within 3 minutes, a second patrol car arrived. Deputy Nathan Reed stepped out, younger than Aligood, clean-shaven, with sharp eyes that scanned the scene quickly. He nodded at Aligood and took a position near the rear of the Lexus. Aligood turned back to Kettner and announced that he was going to search her vehicle. Kettner's voice cut through the air, clear and firm. She stated that she did not consent to a search and that there was no probable cause. Aligood ignored her. He opened the driver's door and leaned inside. His eyes moved across the interior, the leather seats, the empty cup holder, the briefcase on the passenger seat. The black calfskin case bore the same gold-embossed federal court seal as her credentials. Aligood reached for it. Kettner spoke again, louder now. She told him that the briefcase contained classified federal documents, and that he did not have authorization to access it. Aligood did not pause. He pulled the briefcase toward him and forced the lock. The case opened. Inside were 70 pages of documents, each stamped with red block letters, classified. At the top of the stack was an official memorandum from the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General. Aligood pulled out his personal phone. Reed did the same. They began photographing every page. Kettner stood motionless. Her voice was calm, judicial, and precise. She told them they were committing federal felonies under Title 18 of the United States Code. She informed them that every photograph they were taking was being recorded by multiple cameras and uploaded to cloud storage with GPS coordinates and timestamps, and that they were creating irrefutable evidence of their own crimes. Aligood did not look up. He kept photographing. Reed mirrored him, flipping pages, capturing images. Across the street, a construction worker in a yellow vest had stopped to watch. His phone was raised, recording. The 3 bank security cameras continued their silent watch. The dash cam inside the Lexus captured every movement through the windshield. 5 cameras. 5 angles. Every second preserved. Aligood finished photographing the last page. He dropped the documents back into the briefcase and turned to Kettner. He pulled handcuffs from his belt and stepped forward. Kettner extended her wrists without resistance. The cuffs clicked shut, tighter than necessary, the metal biting into her skin. Aligood guided her toward his patrol car, opened the rear door, and placed her inside. The door slammed shut. Through the window, Kettner sat upright, her suit jacket still pressed, her posture composed. Her eyes were forward. Her mind was already 3 steps ahead. The patrol car pulled out of the parking lot at 4:23 p.m., leaving the midnight blue Lexus sitting alone beneath the bank cameras, its driver's door still open, the briefcase still visible on the passenger seat. Kettner did not speak. She did not struggle. She simply sat in silence, the red marks from the handcuffs already forming on her wrists, and waited for the system she had spent her career defending to do exactly what it was designed to do. At 4:12 p.m., Judicial Assistant Robert Stevens glanced at the security protocol checklist on his desk and frowned. Judge Kettner had missed her mandatory check-in. It was a small thing, easy to overlook, except that Judge Catherine Kettner had never missed a check-in in 3 years. Not once. Stevens picked up his phone and dialed her mobile. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He waited 30 seconds and dialed again. Same result. He stood, walked to the security office on the 3rd floor of the Houston Federal Courthouse, and activated the protocol. Deputy U.S. Marshal Laura Bennett received the alert at 4:17. She was in the main marshal's office, reviewing transport schedules, when her radio crackled with the dispatch code for a missing federal judge. Bennett's team moved immediately. 2 vehicles, 4 agents, full tactical readiness. They were on the road by 4:21. Marshal Bennett pulled up the GPS tracker embedded in Judge Kettner's judicial credentials. The signal was stationary, 2.3 miles west of the courthouse. Bennett's vehicle arrived at the bank parking lot at 4:31. The midnight blue Lexus sat alone beneath the security cameras, driver's door open, engine off. Bennett approached cautiously, weapon drawn, scanning the interior. Empty. No signs of struggle. The briefcase was still on the passenger seat, open, documents visible. Bennett radioed for the bank manager. Within minutes, the security office was unlocked, and the footage was queued. 3 camera angles, high definition, time-stamped. Bennett watched the entire stop unfold in silence. The sheriff's approach. The credential check. The refusal. The backup arrival. The forced search. The photographing of classified documents. The handcuffs. The departure. She reached for her phone and called the Kendall County Sheriff's Department. The desk sergeant answered on the 2nd ring. Bennett identified herself as Deputy U.S. Marshal for the Southern District of Texas and directed him to confirm the location of a woman matching a specific description, a black female in her early 40s, wearing a gray suit, taken into custody approximately 30 minutes prior. There was a pause. The sound of a keyboard. Then the sergeant's voice, uncertain now, confirmed that they did have a woman matching that description in holding, brought in by Sheriff Alligood on suspicion of. Bennett cut him off before he could finish. She ordered him not to move the woman, not to question her, and not to allow anyone near her. She informed him that she was en route, and that federal custody transfer was in effect as of that moment. She ended the call and turned to her team. She called for full mobilization and informed them they were extracting a federal judge from county holding. She directed them to document every second, every interaction, and every piece of evidence the county had touched. The convoy moved. At the Kendall County Sheriff's Station, Judge Catherine Kettner sat on the concrete bench in the holding cell. Her suit jacket was folded beside her. Her posture was upright, shoulders square, hands folded in her lap. She had been sitting in the same position for 41 minutes. The door to the holding area opened. Captain Edward Klein entered, his face pale, his movements stiff. He had just received the call from the U.S. Marshal's Service. He stopped outside the cell and stared at the woman inside. Kettner looked up. She addressed him by name, and told him she assumed he had been informed of the situation. Klein nodded slowly. Kettner leaned forward slightly and told him she had 3 questions: where were the documents that had been photographed from her briefcase, whether they had been marked classified, and how many of those photographs had been uploaded to cloud storage. Klein swallowed. He glanced at the evidence log in his hand. He confirmed that the briefcase was in the evidence room, that the documents were marked classified, and that Sheriff Alligood's phone auto-uploaded to his personal cloud account. Kettner nodded. Her expression did not change. She told him plainly that he now had a federal crisis. She explained that among the 70 pages that had been photographed was an active Office of Inspector General investigation, and that investigation named Sheriff William Alligood as the primary subject. Every photograph taken, every timestamp, every GPS coordinate, and every camera angle that recorded the stop now constituted irrefutable evidence of multiple federal felonies. Klein's face strained of color. As the captain's face strained of color, one question hung in the silence. Do you think this stop would have happened the same way if Judge Kettner had been white? Drop a simple yes or no in the comments and tell us why. And if this story is hitting hard, share it now so more people see what real accountability looks like. Klein opened the cell door. His hands shook slightly as he removed the handcuffs. Kettner stood, retrieved her jacket, and walked out. Marshal Bennett and her team arrived at 4:47. Kettner was escorted into federal custody without a word. Bennett's agents moved swiftly through the station, seizing Sheriff Alligood's phone, Deputy Reed's phone, and the briefcase from the evidence room. Chain of custody forms were signed, time-stamped, and photographed. As Kettner was guided to the federal vehicle, she paused at the door. She looked back at Captain Klein, who stood frozen in the hallway. She advised him to secure Sheriff Alligood's office immediately, warning him that the FBI would arrive within the hour. Then she stepped into the vehicle. The door closed. The convoy pulled away. Kettner sat in the back seat, the red marks from the handcuffs still visible on her wrists. Marshal Bennett glanced at her in the rearview mirror and asked if she was all right. Kettner's expression was unreadable. She told Bennett she was fine, then added quietly that Sheriff Alligood was not. The next morning, in a secure federal briefing room on the 4th floor of the Houston Federal Courthouse, Deputy Nathan Reed walked to the head of the table. He removed his Kendall County Sheriff's Department badge, placed it on the polished wood surface, and reached into his jacket. When his hand emerged, it held a different badge, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Nathan Reed. 18 months embedded in the Kendall County Sheriff's Office. The room was silent. Seated around the table were Marshal Bennett, 2 FBI supervisory agents, an assistant U.S. attorney, and Judge Kettner herself. Reed looked at each of them in turn, then began. He explained that the traffic stop the previous day had not been random. It was the culmination of an 18-month operation targeting Sheriff William Alligood's criminal enterprise. His team had fed Alligood false intelligence through a confidential informant that a black woman in a luxury Lexus matching Judge Kettner's vehicle description was transporting high-value contraband. They had known his pattern. They had known he would act. Reed pulled up a digital map on the wall screen. Red dots clustered along specific roads. 623 traffic stops over 15 years. 91% involved minority drivers. The county was 71% white. The statistical probability of this pattern occurring by chance was less than 0.001%. He clicked to the next slide, a photograph of the bank parking lot. He confirmed that he had personally ensured the 5 cameras were positioned and recording, the dash cam in Judge Kettner's vehicle, 3 bank security cameras, and a construction worker he had briefed 2 days prior. Every angle was covered. Another click brought up a photograph of the briefcase. He explained that the classified documents had been placed inside under controlled circumstances. Among those 70 pages was the active OIG investigation naming Alligood as the primary subject. The operation required him to photograph it, to commit the federal felony on camera, with metadata, with cloud uploads, with GPS coordinates. And he had. Reed sat down. The assistant U.S. attorney leaned forward and asked about the search warrants. Reed confirmed they had been executed simultaneously at 6:15 that morning, Alligood's home, his office, his vehicle, and his personal storage unit. The forensic teams had worked for 11 hours and recovered 1,847 unauthorized law enforcement database queries spanning 12 years. They recovered $340,000 in traceable payments from bail bondsmen, tow companies, and a private investigative firm with known ties to organized crime. They recovered text messages, 8 years' worth, containing explicit racial slurs, coordination of targeted stops, and jokes about planting evidence. They recovered spreadsheets tracking stops by race, vehicle type, and outcome. The evidence was cataloged, digitized, and cross-referenced. Every database query was matched to a corresponding traffic stop. Every payment was traced to a corresponding arrest. Every text message was timestamped and geolocated. The federal grand jury convened 4 weeks later. The indictment was returned on a cold morning in November. 49 counts, civil rights violations under color of law, unauthorized access to law enforcement databases, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, theft of government property, unlawful disclosure of classified information, and deprivation of rights under threat of force. The trial began 11 months after the traffic stop. It lasted 4 weeks. The prosecution presented the synchronized 5-angle video. They presented the metadata from the cloud uploads, showing the exact second each photograph was taken and the GPS coordinates where Alligood stood. They presented banking records showing deposits that corresponded to arrests. They presented text messages, read aloud in open court. They presented expert statistical testimony showing that Alligood's stop patterns were a mathematical impossibility if conducted without racial bias. The defense called no witnesses. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned guilty verdicts on all 49 counts. Sentencing was held on a Wednesday in October, exactly 1 year after the traffic stop. Judge Michael Russo, brought in from the Eastern District of Texas to ensure impartiality, sat on the bench. The courtroom was full. Victims, reporters, federal agents, and members of the public who had waited hours for a seat. Russo read the sentence without preamble: 52 years in federal prison, no parole, lifetime revocation of law enforcement certification, and forfeiture of pension and all assets traceable to criminal activity. Sheriff William Alligood stood in the defendant's box, stripped of his badge, stripped of his weapon, stripped of his authority. He did not speak. He was led out in handcuffs. Judge Kettner watched from the gallery. Her expression was calm. She did not smile. She simply nodded once and stood to leave. The civil proceedings moved in parallel. Kendall County offered a settlement 3 weeks after the criminal verdict, $3.9 million, confidential, with no admission of wrongdoing. Judge Kettner refused. She demanded a public trial. She demanded transparency. She demanded that every ignored complaint, every dismissed warning, every buried internal investigation be entered into the public record. The civil trial began on a Monday in February. The jury heard testimony from 47 people who had filed complaints against Sheriff Alligood over 15 years, complaints that were dismissed, buried, or never investigated. They heard testimony from supervisors who had received statistical outlier flags from the State Law Enforcement Commission and ignored them. They heard victim impact statements from 37 individuals whose lives had been destroyed by fabricated charges, illegal searches, and wrongful arrests. One man had lost his job, his home, and custody of his children after Alligood planted evidence during a traffic stop. The charges were eventually dismissed, but the damage was done. One woman had been arrested in front of her daughter's school, handcuffed, and held for 6 hours on a fabricated warrant. The trauma left her unable to drive for 2 years. The jury heard all of it. The verdict was returned on a Thursday afternoon. $10 million. $4 million compensatory. $6 million punitive. The largest civil rights award in Kendall County history. 3 weeks later, on the steps of the Houston Federal Courthouse, Judge Catherine Kettner stood before a podium and a wall of cameras. She wore her judicial robes. Behind her stood the attorneys who had worked the case, representatives from civil rights organizations, and families of the victims. Kettner did not read from notes. She spoke clearly, deliberately, and without emotion. She announced that she was donating the entire $10 million judgment as follows: $4 million to the National Police Accountability Project, $3 million to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, $2 million to the Innocence Project, and $1 million to community legal aid organizations serving Kendall County and the surrounding region. She stated that the money would fund the organizations that fight the very corruption that had targeted her and countless others. The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Kettner did not answer. She simply nodded, stepped back from the podium, and walked inside. The federal consent decree was signed 6 weeks later. Kendall County Sheriff's Department would operate under independent federal monitoring for 10 years. Mandatory body cameras with third-party cloud storage. Redesigned bias and de-escalation training with quarterly testing. Automatic early intervention systems triggered by statistical patterns and stop data. Public quarterly reports on stop demographics, search rates, and use of force incidents. The reforms rippled outward. 9 states adopted model legislation based on the Kendall County Consent Decree. The Foundation for Judicial Accountability was established with Judge Kettner as honorary chair. It trained law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and judges on implicit bias, procedural justice, and constitutional policing. 24 individuals wrongfully convicted on charges stemming from Alligood's fabricated stops were freed. Their records were expunged. Compensation funds were established. The final image was quiet. In a federal prison 3 states away, Sheriff William Alligood sat in orange prison clothing, stripped of his badge, his weapon, his pension, his freedom. He would be 79 years old before he was eligible for supervised release. He would likely die behind bars. In Houston, in the same federal courtroom where she had presided for 3 years, Judge Catherine Kettner sat on the bench in her judicial robes. A new case was called. She listened, asked questions, and issued rulings with the same calm authority she had shown while handcuffed in a bank parking lot. The red marks on her wrists had faded. The authority had not. If anything, it was stronger.